From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Authorities in Venezuela say electricity is slowly being restored in the capital Caracas after an outage was reported on Monday. People are returning to their regular activities and the situation has remained calm. Airports are functioning normally and emergency plans have been activated. Communications Minister Jorge Rodriguez said this latest outage is the result of yet another sabotage against the country's main hydroelectric plant. The government announced a temporary suspension of school and work activities as a consequence of this new sabotage on the electricity system. Our correspondent, Luis Tavera, has the latest from Caracas.
We are moving across Caracas to show how people are facing the latest sabotage to the electric system that has announced by the government. We see how people are moving with their own vehicles, how some people are outside their homes, and how they wait for the reestablishment of these services. They are positive about the work promoted by the Bolivarian government. The government says sabotage are constant. It is expected that the service will be reestablished in the upcoming hours. But this is an obstacle for many Venezuelan citizens that want to reach their workplaces. For that reason, the government has announced the temporal suspension of the work and school activities. We will keep you updated.
We thank Luis for that report. South Africa's governing party, the African National Congress, has reaffirmed its solidarity with the people of Western Sahara. The party's chairperson for foreign relations, Lindiwe Tsulu, said it is time all progressive organizations supported the Western Sahara's right to self-determination. She added that the party will redouble the efforts to end Morocco's occupation of Western Sahara.
Today, the African National Congress is participating at the Solidarity Conference by the SADC countries. This is a struggle which continues exactly the same way as we struggled against apartheid. The African National Congress calls on all progressive forces of the world to give the necessary solidarity so that the people of the Sahrawi can be free, just as we are free as South Africa today.
And Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza is in South Africa, taking part in the Western Sahara Solidarity Conference. He has pledged his government will support the people of the Western Sahara in their quest for independence. The Western Sahara, also known as the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, is the only African country still under colonization by fellow continental nation Morocco since 1975.
Dear brothers and sisters, it's an honor to be here attending the invitation extended by the Southern Africa Development Community to take part in this Solidarity Conference on Western Sahara. This is a national cause for Venezuela. 56 years ago, the Special Committee of the United Nations on Decolonization declared Western Sahara as a non-self-governing territory, and in 1983, in line with principles and ideals of self-determination, Venezuela recognized the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. Since then, and up to date, Venezuela has worked together with the international community in order to contribute to reach a just, lasting, acceptable political solution for the parties, which provides for the self-determination of the people from Western Sahara, in accordance with the purposes and principles enshrined in the UN Charter and within the framework of the mandates of such organization.
Members of the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa have gone on strike at the country's largest manufacturer of construction materials over alleged racism. The workers have accused management of treating black workers differently and paying them lower wages than other races at the company. They have vowed not to return to the work until the company human resources manager is dismissed, who they accused of sowing racism. Earlier, we spoke with South African researcher and activist David van Wyk, who defended that the nationalization of the country's means of production is the only effective way to fight widespread abuse of workers' rights.
Well, I think the way to end racism in the workplace is actually to try and begin to nationalize the wealth and resources of South Africa and to put it under the control of South Africans rather than under the control of international corporations and so on. The international corporations behave with impunity with regard to the wealth of this country and with regard to evading taxes and invoice fraud and so on.
The army chief in Algeria has called for the presidency to be vacated. Lieutenant General Gaed Salah says the people's demands regarding President Abdelaziz Bouteflika are valid. Salah cited Article 102 of the Constitution, which allows the Constitutional Council to declare if the president is unfit to rule. This follows a month of mass protests against President Bouteflika. The veteran UN diplomat Lakhdar Brahimi is set to lead talks on Algeria's political future. And protests have continued to erupt, calling for the president to step down. Algeria has been flooded with protesters waving flags and chanting slogans, calling for Bouteflika to resign. On Monday, journalists demonstrated against the censorship of the media. They demanded to be allowed to publish fair, objective, and impartial information. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. March 24th marked the International Day for the Right to the Truth concerning gross human rights violations. In Brazil, lawmakers and social activists held an event to remember all those who have lost their lives defending human rights.
Lawmakers and Brazilian citizens paid tribute to the victims of the country's military dictatorship, while also rejecting the widespread and systemic violations of human rights in the country. During a ceremony at the lower house for the National Day for the Right to the Truth concerning gross human rights violation and for the dignity of victims, attendees paid tribute to the late Councilwoman Marielle Franco.
It's very important to keep Marielle present, particularly in places such as this. She represents many fights. She represents the defense of human rights. Through her, we also remember Brazilian human rights activists who have also lost their lives.
Us, the indigenous people, are always resisting. There has been 500 years of destruction, 500 years of violating our rights, and our current government has continued such attacks. Just last week, they dismantled the Special Bureau of Health for Indigenous People. That is just another form of genocide against our people.
March 24 is a day to highlight the truth on the face of authoritarianism, a day to raise alarms about President Jair Bolsonaro's promise to put an end to activism in Brazil.
Brazil is living in dark times, but meetings like this try to promote the truth, to combat authoritarianism. But just as we are doing this, a different group of people is planning to commemorate March 31st, the anniversary of the start of the military dictatorship. Our government salutes tortures, it opposes discovering the truth of state crimes and condemns the Truth Commission.
Those in attendance made emphasis on the need to build a more just and equal society, a society in which the use of weapons is not glorified, in which torture, gender violence and femicides are not undermined, a society whose policies are not those of death.
Controversy is spreading as Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is reinstating the commemorations for the 1964 coup d'etat. Our correspondent Brian Muir explains.
Far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has just issued an order allowing the military to commemorate the anniversary of the 1964 military coup this March 31st on their bases. Now, this is something that was common after the dictatorship ended in 1985, but was outlawed by Dilma Rousseff when she was president during her first mandate in 2011. Rousseff had been a victim of torture during the dictatorship, as were thousands of other people, with hundreds of disappearances of union leaders and political activists, and the massacre of thousands of indigenous peoples during the 21-year bloody regime. Jair Bolsonaro, however, said he doesn't even believe that this was a coup. He calls it a revolution. And he believes it's something that's worthy of being celebrated. And this model of the dictatorship, which ran from 1964 to 1985, is something he looks up to as a goal when he makes his plans on how he wants to conduct his government, which already has the highest number of military officers in a presidential cabinet of any time since the 1970s.
We thank Brian for that report. After being sentenced to 10 years in prison for libel, Honduran journalist David Romero Elner has taken refuge in the office of the radio he works with. His colleagues are denouncing the government for sentencing him and silencing members of the media.
After a week of hiding, journalist David Romero decided to host his radio show again. What he didn't know was that the police was waiting for him outside his office to arrest him. From the studio booth, he sent a message to the judiciary.
Don't give in to the pressure by President Juan Orlando Hernandez. You have to ensure the independence of all the judges and the judicial institutions in the country. Don't let the pressure break you up. Stand up against him.
After sending his message, the building of Radio Globo was flooded with fellow journalists who shared their messages of solidarity and denounced the sentence. Romero was sentenced to 10 years in prison in a libel case filed by the wife of the adjunct Attorney General Rigoberto Cuellar.
They cannot censor the voice of the press for telling the truth. That doesn't happen in other countries, but in Honduras, it happens because we are living under a dictatorship.
I don't think this is correct or even legal. To arrest a journalist for doing his job, for informing the people about what is happening in this country.
According to experts, the sentence was arbitrary since a libel lawsuit is not a penal crime, but a civil one. The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights has also rejected the sentence.
The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights has asked the judiciary to issue precautionary measures for journalist David Romero. It has also asked the government to suspend the sentence against Romero.
But the sentence hasn't been overturned, and that's why Romero decided to take refuge in the building of Radio Globo.
I will remain here. Let's see if they dare to break down the doors of the building, like in a dictatorship, to arrest me.
Romero's arrest came after he reported on a corruption scandal in the social security system that involved the family of President Juan Orlando Hernandez.
The relatives of 3 Ecuadorian journalists kidnapped and killed at the border with Colombia are demanding answers 1 year after the crime. The journalists were kidnapped on March 26th of last year while working for a local newspaper. Days later, the government confirmed their deaths at the hands of the armed group Oliver Sinisterra. The relatives continue to demand answers from the government and a proper investigation. Indigenous communities, campesinos, and farmers have started gathering in Paraguay's capital, Asunción, to demand better living conditions. The communities called for demonstrations to reject the government's indifference regarding their situation. They also demand the state to solve the serious social problems that the indigenous and campesino communities have been facing for decades. The United States has come under fire for its decision to increase political and economic pressure on Cuba. The Organization of Eastern Caribbean States is now calling on U.S. President Donald Trump to lift the old blockade on Cuba. Leaders criticize the U.S. government's decision to lift the suspension of Article 3 of the Helms-Burton Act for 30 days from March 19th to April 17th. This makes it possible for lawsuits to be filed against Cuban entities by U.S. claimants, whose properties were seized by the state during the Cuban Revolution. Archaeologists in Peru have found evidence of cultural exchanges and trade between 2 ancient civilizations. These civilizations are thought to have exchanged products such as cotton and dried fish, as well as the management for fishing of fishing ports. With this discovery, scientists expect to learn more about their economic resources and the use of ancient technology.
This is the opportunity to present the fishing city of the Caral civilization, so that it can be learned about how they managed the important fishing resource that this city had, and in what way that information can be rendered archaeologically so that we can compare it with what they were and what they are currently.
Coffee farmers in Guatemala are demanding that Congress allocate emergency funds for this sector, which has been hit by a severe crisis causing millions in losses and growing unemployment. Let's learn more about the crisis engulfing Guatemala's primary commodity.
Dozens of small-scale coffee farmers have been staging a protest outside the Congress of Guatemala, demanding that lawmakers pass a bill that would help boost the country's coffee economy through subsidies. The protesters blanketed the road in front of the Congress, building with raw coffee beans. They are trying to raise awareness about multiple factors, such as crop pests and diseases, that have been affecting their livelihood.
We have climate change, fungus, low market prices, and they are also killing us with a 7% tax that they are taking from us directly, and they know this very well.
Coffee cultivation is one of Guatemala's main economic drivers, but the market has been suffering from a severe crisis that has already caused thousands to lose their jobs. That's why small and medium-scale coffee farmers are asking the government to allocate a $45 million trust fund for specific loans that would help them face the ongoing crisis.
Today, there are about 2 million people who make a living directly or indirectly from coffee producing. But now, there are many coffee farmers with huge debts. We owe money to organizations, exporters, banks, and cooperatives.
To make things worse, coffee prices have been dropping dramatically, both in national and international markets, and there are problems with production. One coffee farmer said now he only manages to harvest an average 30 tons of beans monthly.
Even though I have been producing the same amount as before, I make much less because of the low prices. We are suffering from great loss. It used to spark joy to look at coffee plantations, but nowadays it makes us sad to look at them. That's why we are asking for this law to reactivate the sector.
Meanwhile, coffee farmers protesting outside the Congress building say they won't leave until a rescue fund is approved for the coffee sector. But for now, the majority of lawmakers have been ignoring their pleas, and so the protest continues.
We'll take a short break now, don't go away. Welcome back. Hundreds of people have rallied in the Golan Heights against the U.S. decision to recognize the region as Israeli territory. Demonstrators gathered in front of the governor's building in the city of Bat. Syrian and Palestinian protesters waved flags, and demonstrators also held banners reading "Golan is Syria." And the European members of the United Nations Security Council have said they don't recognize Israel's sovereignty over this territory. They described this annexation as illegal and warned about the consequences this could bring to the region after the U.S. recognition.
Our position on the status of the Golan Heights is well known, and we would like to make it clear that this position has not changed. In line with international law and relevant Security Council resolutions, notably Resolution 242 and 497, we do not recognize Israel's sovereignty over the territories occupied by Israel since June 1967, including the Golan Heights, and we do not consider them to be part of the territory of the State of Israel. Annexation of territory by force is prohibited under international law. Any declaration of a unilateral border change goes against the foundation of the rules-based international order and the UN Charter. We raise our strong about the broader consequences of recognizing illegal annexation and also about the broader regional consequences.
Several countries have denounced U.S. President Donald Trump for violating international law when he signed a decree recognizing Israel's sovereignty on Golan Heights. It's also been described as an all-out aggression against Syria.
Syria is one of several countries which have strongly criticized Trump's order. International organizations have also spoken out against the move. They say it proves that Washington has ignored the UN Charter, international law, and UN Security Council resolutions.
Trump has no power to say that Golan Heights belongs to Israel, to the Zionists. No one has. This decision is a violation of the international law and an aggression against the sovereignty of Syria and the whole Arab world. We, the Iraqi people, as all the Arab people, are rejecting this decision made by Trump.
The government and the people of Syria have condemned Trump's order. They say they will continue the struggle to liberate the occupied region.
This decision will not have any legal effect, and this is just a gift to the Israeli Prime Minister ahead of the elections. After defeating terrorism, the Syrian people will start the battle to liberate the Golan and the occupied Palestine. This is the message by the Syrian people, the government, and the army.
Zionism is behind the military occupation in the Golan. Tel Aviv is getting ready for a potential response from the Syrian army and its allies in the bloc of resistance against the Israeli occupation.
This decision by Trump cannot change the history of the occupied Golan. We insist that it will be liberated soon, as well as all the Arab people, especially the Syrian and the Palestine people. We won't sit back. We will defend our history and our right to reach victory.
The Golan Heights are located in the southwest of Syria, spanning 1,800 kilometers. It borders Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan. The area was captured from Syria and occupied by Israel during the Six-Day War. Israel unilaterally annexed the Golan Heights in 1981. According to Damascus, the moves made by Israel, supported by the US, have no legal effect, so the territory will be liberated sooner than later.
The Thai Prime Minister has said he is not involved in the process of forming the new government. This comes after the pro-junta Palang Pracharat party nominated Chan O-Cham to be next Prime Minister. But it is still unclear how many seats the parties would have in the House of Representatives.
The country has to move forward. I would not have allowed this election to happen if I had wanted to extend my power. Do you understand what I mean? All mechanisms should be aligned to the Constitution, which was voted by the people in the referendum. We must respect the people's voice.
A drag queen has entered politics in Thailand for the first time. Known as Natalia Pleakam in his drag persona, is set to promote LGBTI rights and gender equality in a country where queer people still face discrimination. Pleakam signed up as a member of the Palang Tong Ting Thai party and says that change may come slowly, but LGBTI acceptance is growing.
I think the society is more open-minded, and I want to break people's bias on genders. I want to prove that I can join politics even though my gender is different, because it is in my rights as a Thai citizen.
Lawmakers in the UK have voted to take control of Brexit from Prime Minister Theresa May. We were joined earlier live by political analyst Jorge Martin, who explained the majority of British people feel that May has failed to handle the Brexit negotiations well.
In fact, if one thing unites, I will say, the majority of the people in Britain is that they all think that the Prime Minister has done a very bad job of negotiating this Brexit agreement. And this is one thing that the Tory MPs are very afraid of, is the possibility of a new election, because a new election will likely result in the victory of Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, the leader of the Labour Party, has kept to what was decided at the Labour Party conference. And he has insisted that what is necessary, and I think he is completely right on this, what is necessary is not a new referendum on Brexit, but rather a vote which takes the form of a general election, so that the British people can decide not only on the question of Brexit, but also on the question of the austerity policies.
A Picasso painting worth $28 million has been found by a Dutch art detective. Arthur Brand, known as the Indiana Jones of the art world, found the portrait of Dora Maar. The painting was stolen from a Saudi sheikh's yacht on the French Riviera in 1999. After 4 years of investigating, two intermediaries led the detective to the missing picture. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
From here to beyond the South.